Do we have some folks on the phone?
Representatives from the state agency who regulates, and then Alicia, our town attorney.
Oh, cool. Yeah, she was the, yeah, all right. With Erin, she was with Erin. Okay, now I get it. Okay. All right, so prior to calling the planning commission meeting to order, I want to let our audience know that we welcome you to attend our meeting. However, there are no items on our agenda that require a public hearing. Our agenda includes administrative and educational items. Okay, with that, at about 6:01 p.m., I call the March 27th meeting of the Berthoud Planning Commission to order. And it's our practice to say the Pledge of Allegiance prior to conducting Planning Commission business, so we stand while we say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We do have March 13th minutes, but I don't think we have a quorum to vote on them. So can we hold those staff until our next meeting? All right. So next, commissioners, let's turn to item 5 on our agenda, the work session related to natural healing centers and natural medicine businesses. Director Johnson, will you introduce this item, please?
Yes, Chair Anderson and members of the Planning Commission. This evening, we are just introducing the concept of natural healing centers and natural healing businesses. This will be coming to you at the next session for adoption of code and review of the code, and then a recommendation to send to the Town Board of Trustees. So in November of 2022, Proposition 122 was passed by the voters of the state of Colorado. It's known as the Natural Medicine Health Act. There are 4 and probably many more reasons why this was passed. I do not have a lot of knowledge about this. However, we do have representatives from the state on Zoom, and they'll be introduced a little bit later on, and they may be able to answer some of your questions that I am not able to. So the Natural Medicine Health Act was established for, to develop a regulatory agency to decriminalize personal use. And right now it is psilocybin, it's psilocin initially, and it may expand to other natural medicines, and then also to allow personal use. On this slide, and also in your packet so you can take it home with you, there are some uses that are defined. I'm not going to read these uses. I will read what the term is. So the basics, we have the regulated natural medicine and what that means. We have a natural medicine business, and then we also have a participant. So those are the key terms that will be defined through the code should we adopt. And then we have terms under cultivation, manufacturing, and testing. And again, it really is a cultivation facility, a products manufacturer, and a testing facility. Then we get to centers and services. We have healing center, a micro healing center, and natural medicine services, what they are. There are really 2 separate uses. We have a use for administration of natural medicine that can be like a doctor's office, a dentist's office. Then we have the manufacturing, testing, cultivation, and that's more of an industrial use. So communities, we cannot disallow these uses from being in our community per that voter Proposition 122. But what we can do is we can regulate time, place, and manner. So what we did is we took a look at comparable regulations from Commerce City, Cripple Creek, Frederick, Golden, Granby, Monument, Parker, Pueblo, and Trinidad. And we use those as a base. Golden was used as a base because the information that I found was in a format that was very similar to what the town of Berthoud uses. And really, for the majority, every other ordinance is exactly the same because we're very limited on what we can regulate. Frederick added a few extra things that we just didn't find appropriate for the town of Berthoud. And so we're making those final tweaks to our documents, and you'll see them in a couple weeks. So on the phone, on Zoom with us, that completes staff's presentation. But on the Zoom, we have Allison Robinette, who's the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs. And then I believe we have Amelia Myers, who's a Senior Policy Advisor. We also have Alicia Garcia, who works in the office with our town attorney, Aaron Smith. And again, we have licensing and regulation of natural healing centers. That's the administration of this medicine. And then they also regulate cultivation, manufacturing, and testing facilities. So there are those two different types of uses. And with that concludes staff's presentation. Do you have any questions for me regarding what we will be doing or what we have to do in our code before I turn it over for questions of our guests? Okay, all right, thank you. Hello, are you Allison?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having me tonight.
Yep, Allison, maybe can you tell us a little bit more about these uses and maybe some questions and answers that we just might not know to ask?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to just kind of fill in some more context to what this whole program looks like. So, as a starting point, I just want to highlight that this program is a therapeutic model. So, not only is there the licensing that your staff just covered regarding healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and testing facilities, but our partners at the State Department of Regulatory Agencies are also licensing the therapists who will provide these administration services. And so there's sort of a multiple layer licensing regime here where the individuals who are the therapists must go through a training program that is mandated by the state. And then they must be licensed through our partners at DORA, just like any massage therapist, dentist, nurse, doctor has to be licensed through our partners at DORA. So that I wanted to highlight that because I think it's an important aspect of the sort of bigger picture regulatory program. In addition to that licensing, our department, the Natural Medicine Division within the Department of Revenue, will also be licensing any person who owns a natural medicine business and any individual who handles the natural medicine. So there are some multiple layers here. When it comes to cultivation, let's start there. What we see, and again, the regulated program is only focused on psilocybin and psilocin or magic mushrooms at this point. So when we're talking about cultivation, it does not take a lot of space to grow mushrooms. And so what we anticipate seeing are small operations. This is not going to look like our regulated cannabis cultivations. And unlike regulated cannabis, the mushrooms don't have an odor. They don't require a whole lot of extra work like we see with the cannabis plant growth cycle. When it comes to manufacturing, we started out with a narrow lens. So under the personal use side of the law, no one can create a product out of natural medicine using hazardous substances. We are also imposing that same restriction in the regulatory program, so hazardous substances are not permitted. Additionally, we're starting out with a very narrow scope of allowed product types. So that looks like whole dried mushrooms, powderized capsules, pressed tablets, tea bags, chocolates, and then some of your like soft confections. That all went through an extensive rulemaking process that lasted about 18 months, starting at the end of 2023 through 2024. And so The narrow product allowances mean that there will not be the extraction of products, that won't be occurring. And they're very limited in the types of any kind of solvents that they could be using. And then the last piece I'll hit on are testing facilities. We are mandated by the law to establish a testing program, and that includes testing for contaminants as well as for what the potency or effect of the medicine will be. So every batch of natural medicine must be tested for that potency number. We call that a total tryptamine analysis, and that really is looking at all the tryptamines in the plant, but most specifically looking at psilocybin to calculate what the total psilocin is, and every product must be labeled with that total psilocin number. In addition, products will have to be tested for microbial contaminants to ensure that they're not going to make someone sick when consumed. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question. So how does this differ from, you know, the green rush of the way cannabis was rolled out? And of course, it was a learning experience for everybody, for lack of a better term, right? We kind of made it up as the state made it up as they went along, right? And figured out what the pitfalls were. So what did this legislation learn from cannabis, and how to, you know, for example, prevent people from renting homes and turning the basements into grow operations, and that was the only thing that house was being used for in a residential area, those type of things, and also is there insurances that those products are not getting onto the street in a gray market versus through a legitimate business?
That's a great question. So there are some significant differences between the natural medicine laws and the cannabis laws. First and foremost, this is a therapeutic model. There is no commercial aspect, and in fact, the sale or any transaction for natural medicine is strictly prohibited both in the personal use space as well as in the regulated space. So what people are paying for is the service, the therapy, when they are consuming the natural medicine in a session with a licensed facilitator. And during that administration session, those administration sessions have to happen at a healing center with very narrow allowances for certain circumstances where someone is unable to leave their home for the administration session, in which our partners at DORA have authorized licensed facilitators to go to that person's home for the purpose of an administration session. But I think that's a really big difference here, is that people are not going to be going into these businesses and leaving with natural medicine to consume on their own. So they will go to the healing center, they will consume their natural medicine during their administration session while being supervised by a facilitator, and they have to stay there for a certain amount of time based on the dose that they take, which all has to be determined, but ahead of time with the facilitator. And so, for example, our partners at DORA have set certain requirements when it comes to, if you're going to take this amount of dose of product, then you have to be with your facilitator for a minimum of 5 hours or whatever that sort of increment must be. So I think that's a safeguard here. Now, I do want to point out, we've referenced the personal use side of the law, but we haven't really talked about it. In personal use, natural medicine, which actually is broader than just psilocybin and psilocin, it also includes ibogaine, mescaline, and dimethyltryptamine, which is DMT. Those medicines are all decriminalized, and anyone over the age of 21 is permitted to cultivate it, they're permitted to make products out of it, and they're permitted to share it with other individuals over the age of 21. This is much broader personal use provisions than we have in cannabis, in that there are no possession limits. And really on the cultivation side for personal use, it is limited to a 12 by 12 private enclosed space that must be locked and must be that person's private property who's cultivating. The last piece I will highlight here, when you ask about some of these differences between what we're seeing, is that under the natural medicine program, we have really worked closely with our local law enforcement to help educate, but I think what is going to be critical is that natural medicine is not leaving licensed premises, and if any does leave it for those narrow circumstance administration sessions, any that is left over that isn't consumed must be returned to a licensee for destruction.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
I want to make sure I understand. Thank you for your explanations. What I'm a little confused about is the personal use. So what's to prevent someone who grows or creates these for personal use from just selling it to someone else?
Sorry about that. What prevents someone in the personal use from selling it is that it is illegal. It is still a criminal offense. So one of our roles is working with local law enforcement. We get complaints about people selling them. And so that's where we can support, but as a regulatory agency, we don't have jurisdiction to take action.
What is the qualification of a therapeutic facilitator?
So I can't speak to the specifics, but what I can say is that there are sort of 3 different buckets of the facilitator license, and all of this information is available on our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agency's website. So sort of baseline is that anyone who wants to be a licensed facilitator has to go through a training program that includes didactic training. I think around 150 hours is where they landed. And then they also have to do a practicum experience before they're eligible to obtain a license. That is the first category. The second category of facilitator license is called a clinical facilitator, and that is someone who holds a secondary professional degree or license. And so that would be someone who is a licensed psychiatrist, a licensed MD, someone who can prescribe medicine, as well as diagnose. And so the reason, as I understand it, our partners decided to make this delineation is that there will be screenings that happen during the preparation session, which is a separate meeting between the facilitator and the participant prior to the administration session. And during this preparation session, the facilitator has to screen the potential patient or participant for certain health effects that they may need to prepare for. And if it is identified, for example, that someone is experiencing PTSD or treatment-resistant depression or some other diagnosed condition, then they would only be able to have their experience with a clinical facilitator. And again, this is not really our area, but I do encourage you all to take a look at the rules because I think they've put some good safeguards in there. The last bucket I'll hit on is that there is a legacy facilitator license type, and that's really reserved for those people who have been operating in the indigenous and spiritual space for many years, and there are certain qualifications that you have to demonstrate as having been working with the medicine for a long time in order to qualify for that legacy facilitator license, but I'm not as familiar with that one.
If I could ask one more question, you mentioned the term mescaline. Is that the same term or equal to what's known on the street as acid?
I'm not familiar with that connection. I don't know. Mescaline is associated most frequently with peyote, though the law specifically says mescaline not sourced from peyote because of Federal Religious Freedom Act considerations.
Okay.
Have you already begun issuing these licenses? And has there been has there been a trial run of this at this point?
We began accepting applications for licenses on December 31st, so just a few months ago. We have begun issuing licenses to owners and natural medicine handlers, those employees who are working in the businesses, and we are very close to starting to issue business licenses. We do have some applications that we've received, but we have not yet issued any business licenses.
So I have one more question. So remember when medical marijuana started, everybody had to, you had to have your medical card, right? Is there any type of qualification for people to be able to use these facilities, or is it like you go in and you make an appointment and the caregiver assesses whether you're a candidate or not, or is there a doctor review process to get you to be able to access these medicines?
So it is not a required registration process like we have in the medical marijuana program. It is, and that natural medicine services term consists of a preparation session, an administration session, and an integration session. Only during the administration session is natural medicine consumed. So sort of the evaluation of whether a participant is, or whether natural medicine is appropriate for a participant happens during that preparation cultivation session discussion with the facilitator.
Thank you.
What type of, I'm wondering, what happens if I decide to grow some of these things in my 12 by 12 space? What if I decide, I'd like to grow a little bit more and I end up doing 12 by 24 or a bigger space? Who's going to police that? What type of, and if so, and then if they find it, what type of penalties would I get for doing that?
So that's all outlined in the criminal code. That would be local law enforcement enforcing the personal use restriction for a 12 by 12 cultivation space. I will say that the law provides that a local jurisdiction may increase the space 12 by 12 if they so choose.
So there's some local leeway with regard to some of these rules. Okay. Any other questions?
One more. So you haven't issued any business licenses, so you don't know some kind of cost or price threshold if the average person over 21 were to come in off the street and want to sit around and get a mushroom hive for 4 or 5 hours or whatever that is. Is there any, I mean, do you have any pricing? What does that cost, or what will that cost? Do you know?
I think it'll depend, and I see Amelia's on as well. She may want to weigh in on this question. Because you're paying for the service, it's going to be dependent on what that therapist, that facilitator is going to charge for the session. And Amelia, maybe you can speak to what they're seeing in Oregon's program.
Yeah, thanks, Allison, and hi, everybody. Amelia Myers with the Natural Medicine Division. They're seeing sessions anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 in Oregon, and then folks have also some started nonprofits to do like sliding scale offerings for people. So it's kind of across the board, but it's not just like a $20 thing and you sit there for 10 minutes and then you're on mushrooms. It's like you're paying for someone's therapeutic time. They're gonna sit with somebody for 4 to 8 hours on average. And then spend 2 sessions outside of that mushroom administration session, spending time with the person, like setting goals on the front end and integrating their experience.
Okay.
Have you had interest so far in manufacturing facilities here in Colorado?
Yes, we have. Amelia, do you want to talk about the participant interest survey and then the number of applications we've received?
Yeah, we have, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement prior to the licensing setup itself, just to kind of get an idea for our own fees and for the amount of people who were interested. I think the manufacturers were in the 30s maybe across the state, with half of those being interested in an extraction endorsement, which is what allows someone to make gummies, chocolates, and tinctures. So right now, we have not seen that level of interest yet in the applications. We've only seen 4 product manufacturers, and I think one of those has an extraction endorsement associated. But we're in the first quarter of the first year that we're starting this program. So we did have a lot of interest in our rulemaking. Folks were engaged and thoughtful about what they wanted to see in the rules so that they could get into this business.
Any questions?
No.
We really appreciate you spending time tonight talking with us about
Yeah,
this.
thank you.
It's really
Thank you.
helpful. Probably is a lot of work when you're rolling out a new program and new regulations, and probably will be a lot of work for the next few years for both of you.
All right, so if there aren't any other questions for our guests or even our town attorney that's online, that would conclude this presentation this evening. Our next meeting that we will be together is on the 10th of April. And from 6 to 7 that evening, we're going to have finalized the housing study. And then starting at 7 o'clock, then we will have a public hearing on the code for Berthoud's Code for natural healing centers and natural healing businesses. And so that's when you'll hear that next. Your packets will come out the Wednesday or Thursday before the meeting. So you'll have about a week to review. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. And again, they're in the final stages of just that polishing up to make sure we understand, to make sure that it's very clear for the potential business owners that are interested in coming to Berthoud. We want to be clear and transparent with our expectations, so it's an easy process.
Is our attorney on the phone, you said?
Yes,
So I have a question for her, because it says time, place, and method, correct?
time, place, and manner.
And manner, okay. So does that mean we could restrict is it anybody who wants to own a business like this, we have to facilitate that, or can we limit the number of those type of businesses in town? In other words, not on every street corner, or, you understand what I'm saying? Like, for example, my sister lives in Elko, Nevada, which is a very small town, and theirs is tied to population for marijuana. And so they have one pot shop because that's all the county will facilitate based on that thing. So I think, do we have the flexibility to regulate that way, that as the town grows, maybe we have more of those businesses, where as it's size now, we have fewer of those businesses, so it doesn't seem so overwhelming,
Right, so right now, what staff has been working with from the attorney's team, and Alicia, feel free to jump right on in, is from the manufacturing, testing, cultivation standpoint, limiting those types of businesses to where we currently would allow the marijuana businesses to be. So that's really that First Street corridor north of Mountain and south of, I can't remember, maybe Teddy. No, so it's limited to that industrial zone district because again, it's a manufacturing process. And that's currently where our marijuana cultivation and manufacturing processes are located there. So it's a similar type. And then as for the administration centers where one would go like to a doctor or a therapist, we're taking a look at in the commercial zone districts where those are allowed. So it wouldn't be on, residential. And then there are also setback requirements that the state has. I believe it's 1,000 feet from daycares. So we've found where the daycare centers as well as home-based daycare centers are. And we have those that we're doing the final polish up on a map so that at the next stage we can show you where these could be in Berthoud. So again, 100% transparent, but we're doing all of our final review and determination of the place. Then the time, we can regulate hours of operation, and then manner, we can regulate things like in Frederick, you have to have specific type of security lighting and security alarms and bars on windows. And some of those types of physical attributes might not be what we're looking for in Berthoud. So, we're working through that as well to put the final polish on what we'd like to see.
So, are you saying that, because you hit on something here that makes me wonder about security, for example. Because if you're storing these things in that therapeutic facility, would we be able to somehow require that there be that they be placed in an area that's more secure, or that they have the facility itself has certain security types of systems and that kind of thing?
Yes, and so we've used the base regulations from these communities here that have adopted regulations thus far. And so we went ahead and utilized some of their base recommendations for lighting, security, cameras, all of that.
Sorry to interrupt, we do have a raised hand here, so I'm gonna change the camera over real quick. Go ahead.
Okay, I hope it's okay I raised my hand. I just thought it might be helpful for you all as you're thinking about security requirements to know that at the state level, we do require security requirements, including secure storage requirements for each one of these facilities. They have to have restricted areas, and it includes camera requirements for any administration area, any restricted area, which is where the medicine would be growing, or they would be packaging or sampling that for testing purposes. So there are a number of requirements in place at the state level as well, including security plans that each licensee must submit to the state, and that they have locks and certain things like that. So I just wanted to point that out to the committee and council as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. So I see what you're saying, and so what you're looking at right now is saying that these are certain, that the cultivation, manufacturing, et cetera, may be a permissible use in certain areas that we've defined in the town, into that quote unquote zoning, we call it that anymore, but, you know, and same thing for these therapeutic facilities, that they may be considered permissible use in certain areas that we define in that zoning, so that's what you're looking at this point.
Yep, and again, we utilize these other communities, and Erin Smith, our town attorney, I believe she also provides services to a community that may have already implemented. So we use some of those templates as well that are working with these other communities. So why reinvent the wheel if we can borrow something that's working well? And we have had interest. Somebody is interested in opening a manufacturing, cultivation, testing potential facility in Berthoud. So we do currently have a moratorium. It was extended on Tuesday until November, or at such time when our ordinance is passed for these regulations. And we cannot prohibit.
So one of my questions is, you know, we extended the moratorium. Is there a time where we have to have our ducks in a row because this is, you know, regulated by the state, right? That we can't, it's not a choice. We have to decide what we can control. But is there a time limit that we have as a municipality to that decision has to be made? You know, we can't keep extending moratoriums for the next 15 years, in other words, is what I'm saying.
No,
It's a
and
process issue there.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Commissioner Brody, I did not review how long we can extend because the town doesn't have an intent to continue extending. The reason why we had to extend is we just, with the timing of all of the hearings coming up and when we have them scheduled, the last hearing or the second reading before the town board of trustees fell 1 week outside that moratorium, so we just went ahead and extended.
Yeah, and I'm not implying we would kick this down the road inevitably, but I to my point is, like, I think it's gonna happen, right? But we really wanna do our due diligence as a municipality to make sure it's the right fit in the right areas, as you mentioned, so that's the only reason I brought that up.
Yep, no, nothing implied, I didn't
Maybe I'm onto
assume
something.
anything,
I
no,
don't know.
I think the difficulty there is weaving it into our existing scheme of zoning and making sure that makes sense, and I know that's what you guys have been grappling with.
Mhm.
It's kind of a challenge, I think.
Yep, and I think we have a good solution. And just now looking at the overlays and where they can't be and making sure that we have the most up-to-date data. And then we'll be presenting to you those maps so that you can see where these different types of uses can be occurring. Now, of course, we're not gonna map everybody's individual 12 by 12 that they can have because that's just a given.
So if you don't have a large yard.
Or basement, yes, I think.
Someplace dark and cool.
Yeah, right. So I think, did you have a question for Alicia?
No, you answered the question already.
Okay. No other hands raised?
Not at this time.
I appreciate our state employees being with us, helping us with this. Used to be a state employee myself, so I get it. Regulatory things.
Yeah, and it has been absolutely wonderful for staff because again, as planners, we don't necessarily have expertise in every type of land use. And again, our charge is based on process. So we just want to make sure that the process is transparent, it's equitable, everybody gets their due process. And so the state provided the information that was in all of your packets as well. So they have been a wonderful source of information for us to help us get to where we are now. So thank you, Amelia and your team,
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate.
or Allison, sorry.
Appreciate, because really cannabis, even with medical and then recreational, was literally the Wild West for quite some time, right? And now it's starting to really kind of consolidate and businesses are being run like businesses and, it was left up to the local municipalities. Yes, the state said you could do this, but then the municipalities could decide individually. But I think this is more of a therapeutic angle that they're taking and the nice part is we have some say in it, so.
I feel like it's more, the thought behind it's more developed at this point.
Yeah, lessons learned, I think,
Yeah.
from marijuana for sure.
Is there anything else that we need to know as before the next meeting?
No, not at all. You will be getting your packets before the next meeting. Again, we try to get them to you on Wednesday or Thursday. And that next meeting is on, it's on, yes, April 10th.
Are you gonna have dinner? I know we talked about
We
that.
will have, yes, for the Housing Steering Committee, we will have dinner again. And Commissioner Smith will be back.
Wonderful.
Yes, so
I'm
I
very happy.
heard from her this week and our children are beautiful and it will be nice to have her back. And I know that, I believe another commissioner said they might not be there. Was it still Commissioner Hoffman's?
I think it wasn't into this one.
Stacy's gonna be back too.
Will Stacy be back
I
then?
think she'll be back.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
All right.
So we have to make sure that Abigail brings us pictures. And then since Stacy's coming from Chicago, we have to text her and say bring Frango mints.
Yes, sounds good.
Maybe pictures and Frango mints. Okay.
All right. And then, so that completes that agenda item and I'll let you go move on.
Thank you.
And you gave us the staff report just now, right? So I don't think there's anything else for us to talk about unless either of you have something you want to mention. No, we didn't mention either. So we can go outside and be in the sun for another maybe 40 minutes. Okay, with that, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Since we only have, yeah, thank you. So Commissioner Brody moves to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I second.
Commissioner Pons seconds. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And no's and nays and extensions. Great, and we are adjourned. Thank you, staff.
Yeah,
Thank you.
her
This is
pleasure.
really helpful. I'm glad we got to talk about this prior to the next meeting. It's helpful.
Yeah, I think it is helpful, especially understanding from the state's regulatory side, parameters that are in place with them.